On the Road with Kelly and Bob is brought to you by Mueller Metal Roofs and Buildings. Made in America, made to last. Coming up on this episode...
The tribal motto is unconquered and unconquerable. We've always been really rather small in terms of numbers.
Hi, we're Kelly
and Bob Phillips, and we're on the perpetual road trip of America's back roads,
where the journey is always the destination.
I want to thank you for joining us this week. I'm Bob Phillips.
And I'm Kelly Phillips. And on this episode, we are taking a trip to Ada, Oklahoma. It is the home of country music superstar Blake Shelton. But the reason we were there was to find out about some things going on at the Chickasaw Nation.
Yep, seems their population dwindled to just a few people at one time, and their native language was on the verge of becoming extinct when the governor of the Chickasaw Nation stepped in and started a program, and that turned things around. Morning in Ada, Oklahoma. The heat of summer has yet to set in, and today it looks like it could rain, as the people of this town of more than 16,000 go about the beginnings of their day.
Over at the Chickasaw Nation Division of History and Culture, some members of this American Indian tribe are busy recording stories in their own native language.
Sophomore into senior year, my Sports Illustrated, my faces crowds suffocated.
Carlin Thompson is telling the story of how a traditional Chickasaw ceremony helped him to become a champion track and field star.
Stanley Smith is recounting a story about his grandmother's amazing dog, Red, a remarkable canine that seemed to understand when she spoke to him in her native Chickasaw language.
But the stories they are telling isn't the most important part of this exercise. It's the language they are speaking, the Chickasaw language, a language spoken by members of a Native American group that at one time had dwindled to just a handful of people. And only a few of those people grew up speaking their native tongue.
Today our citizenship numbers are around 80,000, and we're all over the world. We have citizens in the UK, in Australia. The majority of citizens, was safe to say, live either on the reservation or within Oklahoma, and then we have probably a third or so that live outside of Oklahoma, all across the United States. So small, self-determined. When you look in the total tribal population is north of 80,000 now. We have roughly 30, less than 30, 35 native speakers. So first speakers, first language in the home.
30, 35 people out of 80,000 something people.
Yeah.
Josh Hinson did not grow up speaking his native language or living the life of a member of the Chickasaw Nation, in spite of the fact that his Chickasaw heritage goes back generations. He was instead a product of an effort to assimilate Native Americans into what Josh calls the WASP culture.
Referring to the dominant white Anglo-Saxon Protestant world around him, a culture that was almost successful in convincing Native American parents and grandparents that the best thing they could do for their children was to raise them to fit in and to not be a part of their cultural heritage. And that began by not teaching them the Chickasaw language.
Got hired on by Chickasaw Nation as a photo archivist, and did some other work, including developing the exhibits for the Chickasaw Cultural Center at Sulphur. But one of the first things I did was I connected with native speakers. Growing up outside of the reservation boundaries, and My Chickasaw grannies were the products of boarding schools, so like they did a really effective job of stripping much of what makes us who we are from them in these schools. So I met with native speakers for the first time, I was like 20 years old.
Today, Josh finds himself not only living in the Chickasaw world, but leading a tribal effort to restore and expand the language of the Chickasaw people. By order of the governor of the Chickasaw Nation, the Chickasaw language and culture are to be made available to anyone who wants it.
Governor Anatubby has been our governor since 1987, and one of his fundamental platform positions has been that, culture is important, language is important. Native speakers chose, out of love, to withhold aspects of the culture, and the language in particular.
And that program to protect the culture of the Chickasaw people has seen great success. The few remaining native speakers of the language have been engaged to pass it on to younger generations, and a small group of students are being paid to become fluent, with the promise that they will continue to teach the language to future generations.
You'll meet two young folks today, that are in their late 20s, early 30s, and they're doing the same work that I was doing at 24, 25. Learning the language on a daily basis. They're a couple, they have a baby due in June, and that baby's first language is going to be Chickasaw.
My name is Jason Morgan. I'm 24 years old. I live in from Ada, and I'm a Chickasaw Academy participant.
My name is Brianna Mason. I'm a Chickasaw citizen, and I also work for the Chickasaw Nation. I am a participant of the Chickasaw Academy.
Jason and Brianna aren't reading a textbook to learn the language. They are being taught one-on-one by a man whose first language was Chickasaw.
My name is Luther John, and I'm a full-blood Chickasaw Indian. I've been speaking Chickasaw language since 2 or 3 years old, all my life. And I am 80 years old.
Brianna says it's important to her to know her native language because, well, it's who she is.
To me, it's everything. It really is tied in with who I am as a person, both Chickasaw and as a human being. For me, language has helped with figuring out who I am in my identity. And that's something I struggled with a lot growing up. I want to pass that on because without our language, I feel like we lose the essence of who we are as Chickasaw people.
And Luther John says he feels it's his duty to pass along what he knows, because if he doesn't, he fears his culture will die.
I have a granddaughter she's 4 years old, and that's all I speak to her. She just started school. And when I say in Chickasaw, she may answer me in English, but she knows what I'm saying. And I'm hoping one day that she'll answer back in Chickasaw.
Josh Hinson says he now knows that speaking his native language gives him a different view of the world. And he knows that when his time on earth is finished, his language will still be important.
You talk to anybody that acquires a second language, whether it's their heritage language or not, there's something there, like you get this unique sort of worldview that you didn't have access to otherwise. The birth of our first child was pretty significant, and as I said before, I just felt sort of divorced from like the cultural life, like the things that really make us at the core of who we are as Chickasaw people, and I wanted him to have that. So moving us back here, working for the tribe, living on the reservation, hanging out with the old folks, learning the language, like they grew up, our two biological children and our adopted boys grew up surrounded in community. Chickasaw was the first language that our second son heard. There's real power in the language when you suddenly, you realize you're tapping into this worldview. There's a spiritual power that's sort of ineffable, you can't even really describe it. Knowing that I can communicate with my ancestors, we could talk. When I'm an old man and I cross over and they meet me, we'll be able to talk. I'm the first fluent person in my family in 40 years. It's a pretty big deal.
And Josh elaborates a little bit more why it was so important for him to get his family back to the Chickasaw Nation.
You know, we're responsible for one another. It's about the we, not about the I. And I think there's a lot of that still lives in those 80,000 of us that are still around today, deeply committed to the overall well-being of our people. You know, to enhance the overall quality of life of each and individual citizen is the only reason that we're here. So regardless of what aspect of the programs, tribal services that we're offering, our job is to make sure Chickasaw's life is the best that it can be. And that's our part in language, is ensuring that people have access to this thing that really makes them fundamentally different from every other people on the planet, and that's the language.
Another cool thing, in 2015, the Chickasaw Nation partnered with Rosetta Stone so anybody can learn the Chickasaw language.
And don't forget, the best way to hear these stories is through the Odyssey app.
You know, it's free and you can listen anytime, anywhere.